Class, welcome to Chapter 2. This is Ethics in Public Speaking. Students in the past have always wondered what ethics meant within the context of a college course or public speaking, and that's what you're going to learn today. And this has a lot to do with what the syllabus discusses in terms of plagiarism, in terms of making sure that you act with integrity as you prepare for your speech and when you deliver your speech. So let's get into what ethics means. All right, ethics deals with issues of right and wrong in human affairs, right? So it's the course of action you take that our society considers to be a right course of action or a wrong course of action. So we have ethics in public policy and the laws that we construct. We can debate whether or not laws are ethical or not. Sometimes they're not necessarily ethical, but they are legal. They're not the same thing. But sometimes things are legal and they're not necessarily ethical, or they are ethical. So we do create laws based on our values, and we assume that our values are ethical. Ethical means right and unethical means wrong. But the two are not the same. Ethics is a matter of what we value in our society in terms of how to treat each other and how to create laws and policies that protect or punish us for the things that we do. All right. So ethics is a branch of philosophy that deals with issues of right or wrong in human affairs. Ethical questions arise whenever we consider what an action is moral or immoral, fair or unfair, just or unjust, honest or dishonest. These questions come up in many aspects of daily life, from parenting decisions to workplace dilemmas. So like we said before, there can be an ethical dilemma at any level of life. It can be interpersonal, it can be with your kids, with your friends, at your job, within the law, within society itself. This year, we are having lots of ethical discussions as we are in the midst of a presidential campaign. And so we are all attempting to vote based on our value system and our ethical beliefs. All right. In public speaking, ethics or ethical considerations are especially important because speech making is a form of power that can carry heavy responsibilities. It is your ability to influence, to communicate effectively, and to influence someone to change their minds or introduce them to a new idea that could further go on to harm or help them. So you have to consider what is considered right in how you prepare for your speech and how you deliver your speech. While ideally a speaker would be truthful and devoted to the good of society, history has shown that the power of the speech can be abused and sometimes with disastrous consequences. Speakers face ethical issues at every stage of the speech-making process, from choosing a topic to delivering the final presentation. The book provides an example of an ethical dilemma faced by a political candidate named Felicia Robertson. So she must decide whether or not to use potentially damaging information about her opponent in her campaign speeches. And she weighs her commitment to fair play against her desire to win. So she's basically saying, I could destroy this person with information I have, but do I want to win in a way that I consider ethical and fair? And her belief that her opponent's victory would harm the community. Now she's measuring that against how bad is this person and how important is it that they are not in public office. All right. This illustrates how ethical decisions in public speaking often involve weighing competing values and considerations. The chapter emphasizes that while there are no simple answers to complex ethical dilemmas, sound ethical decisions involve evaluating potential actions against a set of ethical standards. So you already kind of have a sense of what you believe is right or wrong. And before you take a set of actions or do something, you ask yourself, am I applying these guidelines? Am I applying my moral standards to what I am doing? So even outside of class, you know right from wrong by now, right? Do you always do what you're supposed to do, or do you fall short sometimes of your own ethical standards and values? Ethical conduct can provide a reliable compass for navigating challenging situations. All right? So we call ethical decisions weighing the potential course of action against our ethical standards. So within the university environment, we have ethical standards laid out to you in your student handbook, what you're allowed to do on campus, say on campus, where, what's considered fair speech or free speech and what's considered a violation of that speech, what's considered cheating or plagiarism and what isn't. All of these things are laid out to you by the college. So the college is giving you the ethical standards by which they will weigh a course of action if you do something to violate those standards or if you live up to those standards as well. They reward students as well for, doing the right thing. So those are ethical decisions, the decisions you make based on the standards that you have. So there are guidelines to ethical speaking. And the first thing you want to do is make sure your goals are ethically sound. The first responsibility of an ethical speaker is to ensure their goals are ethically sound. Speakers should consider whether their objectives are consistent with the welfare of society and their audience. The book provides an example of a student who declined a job that would have required promoting cigarettes, which she viewed as harmful. And that is a person of high integrity. If she thought, okay, I can make money from it and let people make their own decision, or did she realize that she has a lot of power to influence and she doesn't want to influence anyone to do that? So while different individuals may reach different conclusions based on their values, the key point is that speakers should thoughtfully examine the ethics of their goals. When you're preparing your speech, you want to be fully prepared. That's part of being ethical. Ethical speakers have an obligation to thoroughly prepare for every speech. This involves more than just serving the speaker's self-interest. It's about respecting your audience's time and attention. The book notes that an unprepared 30-minute speech to 200 people wastes 100 hours collectively from the audience. So you want to be prepared, and that includes everything from analyzing the audience and choosing the topic that is relevant to them, rehearsing your delivery so you respect their time by showing you put in effort, but most crucially involves being fully informed on the subject matter and doing your best to accurately present that subject matter to your audience. You have an ethical duty to research thoroughly to avoid communicating erroneous or misleading information. Lastly, you want to actually be honest about what you say. Honesty, is paramount to ethical public speaking. We know that people make mistakes and that sometimes you don't know things, and that's okay. But what is worse than not knowing something is lying about knowing it. The entire enterprise of public speaking rests on the assumption that speakers can be trusted to tell the truth. That is how you build integrity, and that's how you build reputation, by someone saying, yes, they get things wrong sometimes, but I believe in them. I believe in their intentions. That is really important in terms of building credibility. So while there may be a rare situation where complete honesty is inadvisable, speakers should generally strive for truthfulness in their statements. This includes avoiding subtle forms of dishonesty like manipulating statistics. I've had students that have done that, quoting out of context, misrepresenting your source, or substituting innuendo for evidence, or using narrow anecdotal experience in place of evidence. Ethically responsible speakers also do not present others' words as their own through plagiarism. All right, so something to consider. One of my situations I've had with a past student is that the student was very religious and wanted to give a speech to a university class on public speaking about why they should avoid premarital sex. And he gave these really exaggerated statistics about the rate of a particular STD in the DC area. And so immediately students knew it was a lie because the statistic was just kind of something like 80%. Like, if that were true, they'd have put a bubble around DC and no one would be able to leave. But he kept insisting this, so the students immediately were turned off. And when he was done speaking, they were all raising their hand, trying to get at him. And afterwards, I told him to bring the study forth. And the study, in fact, did not say that. The study referred to a small group of people who were tested for the disease and were found to have it. But that does not mean you can go ahead and conclude that the entire city had the same condition based on a very narrow sample size of people. So I believe that he knew this, but he wanted an inflammatory, provocative statistic to hand to the class. And what he ended up doing was discrediting himself. So from that point on, everyone thought, oh, he's irrational and religious, rather than, oh, he just made a mistake. If people thought he genuinely made a mistake, I think they would have treated the mistake differently. So you want to consider that. You want to also make sure that you avoid name calling and other forms of abusive language. So you have a right to disagree with what anyone says. You don't have a right to disrespect them because you disagree with them. Ethical speakers refrain from using language that defames, demeans, or degrades individuals or groups. Name calling and abusive language can cause psychological harm and reinforce prejudices when used over time. So we definitely don't allow it. If I see it in the comment section, let me just say that I'll have to deal with you individually. Additionally, such language can be used to silence opposing voices. So if people feel that they're going to be attacked for disagreeing with you, they'll just say nothing. And that's not what you want in a classroom in which you want to facilitate discussion and, sharing ideas. This undermines free expression and the exchange of ideas that can really help in a democratic society. So while name calling may be legally protected as free speech, just because it is free speech doesn't mean that it is not ethically sound, doesn't mean that it's ethically right. and certainly not in a public speaking class. So that's an example of something that may be legal, but is still unethical. You want to make sure you put ethical principles into practice. So it's not enough to say you have these beliefs. You have to actually walk the walk that you talk. The book emphasizes that it's not enough to simply acknowledge the importance of ethics. You must consistently act on those ethical principles throughout your preparation and through your presentation, even when it's inconvenient, even when it will be easier for you to cheat, even when it will be easier to fudge numbers. The long term, it won't be so good for you. You want to make sure that you act with integrity. All right. So the chapter provides a checklist of questions for speakers to assess the ethics of their speeches as they prepare and present. All right. So like we said, name calling is language that defames, demeans, or degrades an individual or a group. And you know all of those types of names because y'all be online. So I know you know. All right. So let's talk about plagiarism. Plagiarism is presenting another person's language or ideas as your own. It's serious. It's a serious breach of ethics, and it can have severe consequences both academically, professionally, and personally. The book outlines 3 types of plagiarism. Okay, so the first is called global plagiarism. The second is patchwork plagiarism, and the third is incremental plagiarism. So global plagiarism refers to stealing an entire speech from a single source and passing it off as your own. So back in the day, people used to just go to Wikipedia, copy, paste. Sometimes my students would even leave the little blue hyperlink, and I have to be like, why? Why? All right. It's the most blatant and unethical form of plagiarism. In an academic setting, it often occurs when students procrastinate and resort to just downloading speeches the best way they can to just avoid having to be late or not turn something in. So patchwork plagiarism refers to speakers cobbling together materials from 2 or 3 sources without proper attribution. I want to say here that no one expects you to come to college knowing everything. So there is an expectation that you use secondary sources, primary sources, mostly secondary. But the expectation is also that you cite them, you prove that they're good sources, and you draw conclusions from the sources that you use. So it is not a flex to plagiarize and to write a whole document and don't say where the information came from. It is a flex to take information that you've researched, cite your sources, give credit where credit is due, and then draw your conclusions based on those sources. So that's what you want to do. Even if the entire speech isn't taken from one source, it's still plagiarism in the content and is composed almost entirely of others' work without credit. So to avoid this, speakers should always consult multiple sources and keep track of those sources. Like you can open a Word document and just do a little bibliography as you do your research so that you keep track of where all your information is coming from. The next kind is called incremental plagiarism, and this involves failing to give credit to a particular part of a speech borrowed from others, even if the speech as a whole wasn't pirated. So even if you did well for the most part, if you still take an idea, either verbatim or the paraphrasing of the idea, and you don't quote where that person came from, or at least cite where the source came from, this is still unethical. This is the type of plagiarism that I think is a little more, I wouldn't call it sophisticated, but it's one of those things that kind of get glossed over because it's not as blatant as global plagiarism or patchwork plagiarism, but it's still unfair both to the original source and to your audience. So make sure that you just make sure you cite your sources. All right, so plagiarism and the internet. The internet poses both increased temptation and confusion regarding plagiarism. Speakers must cite internet sources just as they would print sources. So just because it comes from a website, make sure you choose a high quality website and you go ahead and post the link with information about the author, the owners of the website, the title of the article, when the article was written. You should still treat an internet source just as you would a physical material source like a newspaper or a magazine. So make sure you have details like the book title, the author, the last update of the website, your access date. What is the date that you used it? Because websites do change. There are programs like the Wayback Machine. So if you say the website says something is not there anymore, there are ways for us to go back and find archived information from that website to see if you accessed that website in 2022 and what you said is on there was on there. So you want to make sure you just cover your bases by just keeping track of where you get your information from and when you got it and who the source is. All right. So just as there is with the speaker and preparing for your speech, there are ways to be an ethical listener as well. Speech making is a two-way speech. You have a speaker and you have a listener. So you are, as a listener, are also obligated to respect the speaker, when they're giving their presentation. And so let's talk about some of those obligations. You want to make sure you try to be courteous and attentive. Just as a speaker has an ethical duty to prepare, listeners have an ethical duty to be courteous, supportive, and attentive. This is especially important in the classroom setting where students should support each other's learning. And you do that by being a friend to your classmates. It's hard enough to do this. So you want to create a welcoming environment, even if you're not totally interested in their topic or whatever. So make sure you maintain eye contact with the speaker, provide nonverbal feedback and verbal feedback through your peer reviews. And you should be conscious of how your behavior can affect a person's confidence and composure. You want to be a supportive person, not a person that contributes to someone's anxiety. You want to avoid being prejudiced towards the speaker. And prejudice can be both deliberate and conscious, but it can also be very unconscious. I've had students laugh at a student because of their accent, and they thought it was funny, and that person didn't think it was funny. It made them not want to speak in class. But the students that were laughing weren't even aware that that person interpreted the behavior in that way. So you want to make sure that you err on the side of being kind and supportive, and don't assume everyone has your same sense of humor. So you want to understand and respect your speaker and evaluate their message fairly. Avoid judgments based on their appearance, their name, their race, their gender, their reputation, the clothes that they're wearing, even to some degree the topic they chose. So yes, some people choose inflammatory topics on purpose, but sometimes they don't even know necessarily that what they're saying is wrong. There is such thing as genuine ignorance. So you can still respond respectfully and disagree, but you don't want to attack the person or to completely tune them out just because you don't like what they're saying. So avoid prejudgment. Assess them using critical thinking, so using evidence and reasoning, and be critical in the way that you give your feedback to the student without necessarily being unethical, unkind, and disrespectful. You want to try to maintain the free and open expression of ideas. So by our age, we say that if you cannot engage the idea, you can only respond by calling someone stupid or slow or silly or something. That's your lack of maturity, and that might be your lack of knowledge as well. So you want to maintain the free expression of ideas by support the speaker's right to have an opinion, even if you disagree with the opinion. While there are some narrow legal exceptions, in general, the right to free speech is protected by the First Amendment and supported by experts in communication ethics. We have to be supportive of the free flow of ideas. Efforts to restrict speech, even when well-intentioned, often end up repressing minority and unpopular viewpoints, and supporting a speaker's right to express ideas doesn't have to mean that you agree with them. All right, so those are things you need to consider as being an ethical this ethical speaker and an ethical listener in this class. And as you move forward, especially some of you might go on to take debate or take other classes that require you to engage difficult ideas. Some of you are going to go to law school. You have to consider your ethical standards and how you want to be perceived by your audience. And that what you want is integrity. You want people to say, even when I don't disagree with them, I trust them. I think they're good natured. I think that they have the best intentions. And that's the kind of speaker you want to be. All right. Thanks for listening.